His eyes, dark, restless, almost predatory, first seared themselves into history as Michael Corleone in The Godfather. In that moment, Hollywood crowned a new king. Yet behind the cold stare of a mafia boss was a boy from the Bronx, raised by a single mother, abandoned by a father, and haunted by poverty. Fame would one day lift him from obscurity, but it would also imprison him in a role he never truly escaped. Al Pacino once confessed, "I never chose fame. Fame chose me." But what happens when fame chooses you, demands everything you have, and gives little in return? For Pacino, the cost of glory was staggering. Broken relationships, years of alcohol abuse, a career that teetered on the edge of collapse. He became the face of brilliance, yet also a man wandering through shadows. Loved by millions, but alone in countless nights. How did one of the greatest actors alive balance triumph and tragedy, light and darkness? And what does his story reveal about the true price of becoming a legend? Alfredo James Pacino was born in East Harlem in 1940, but it was the Bronx that shaped him. His father left when he was just 2, leaving his mother, Rose, to raise him in the shadows of poverty. Young Al spent his childhood wandering city blocks, sneaking into movie theaters and finding solace in the flickering images on the silver screen. He often joked that the streets were his real classroom, but beneath that humor was loneliness and longing. School was never his refuge. He dropped out before finishing high school, a decision that worried his family. Yet inside him burned a stubborn conviction. He wanted to act. His friends called him Sonny, and while others drifted into trouble, Pacino chased auditions. The journey was brutal, rejections piled high, and at times he could barely afford food or rent. Then came the actor's studio, where legendary mentor Lee Strasberg saw something raw, unpolished, and extraordinary. From dingy stages and cramped apartments, Pacino began to rise. Few believed that this quiet, wiry boy from the Bronx could one day define American cinema. But destiny had already begun its quiet work. In 1972, the world changed for Al Pacino. The Godfather hit theaters, and the young actor, still relatively unknown, was suddenly thrust into immortality. His portrayal of Michael Corleone, the reluctant son who transforms into a ruthless mafia boss, was chilling in its precision. Audiences were captivated. Critics hailed it as one of the most nuanced performances in cinema. Almost overnight, Pacino became not just a star, but the face of a generation's greatest film. Success followed swiftly. With Serpico in 1973, he embodied the moral struggles of a cop torn between duty and corruption. A decade later, in 1983, he delivered another unforgettable role, Tony Montana in Scarface. His ferocious cry, "Say hello to my little friend," echoed across theaters and into pop culture, forever cementing his legend. Awards, magazine covers, and fame surrounded him, but with every spotlight came mounting pressure. Pacino was no longer just an actor. He was an icon expected to perform miracles every time he stepped onto a set. And behind the ovations, cracks began to appear, cracks that hinted at the personal battles waiting in the shadows. For all his mastery on screen, Al Pacino's personal life was far less certain. Unlike many of his peers, he never walked down the aisle. Love came to him in chapters, intense, passionate, but fleeting. He shared romances with actresses like Jill Clayburgh, Tuesday Weld, Diane Keaton, and Beverly D'Angelo. Each relationship carried moments of tenderness, but none endured long enough to become a marriage. Still, Pacino became a father. He has 3 children, Julie Marie from his relationship with acting coach Jan Tarrant, and twins Anton and Olivia with Beverly D'Angelo. Though he often spoke about the joy his children brought him, he also admitted to the struggles of balancing fatherhood with the relentless demands of fame. Friends described him as deeply private, often keeping his family away from the spotlight. For Pacino, intimacy was complicated. He longed for connection but feared the weight of permanence. The tabloids called him Hollywood's eternal bachelor, but in truth he was a man searching for a safe harbor he never fully found. And from that quiet yearning, another storm would rise, the kind that no award or applause could ever silence. By the mid-1980s, the brilliance of Al Pacino seemed to dim. After the explosive success of Scarface, his career entered a turbulent chapter. A string of films failed both critically and commercially. Projects like Revolution 1985 left audiences and critics bewildered, with some calling it the lowest point of his career. The man once hailed as the future of acting was suddenly labelled a star in decline. Away from the screen, Pacino wrestled with his own demons. Alcohol became a companion, numbing the pressure of expectation and the loneliness of fame. Friends worried as he withdrew into himself, alternating between bursts of intensity and long stretches of silence. To the public, he was still the fierce Michael Corleone, or the unhinged Tony Montana. But privately, he was a man haunted by doubts, questioning whether he had lost his craft. The contrast was stark, the dazzling icon on magazine covers versus the weary figure spotted by paparazzi, his eyes clouded and spirit diminished. The applause had grown quieter, and whispers of washed up circled around Hollywood. And then came a night when Pacino would finally confront the darkest mirror of his own existence. There was a night, Pacino would later admit, when the silence felt unbearable. The roar of applause, the flash of cameras, all of it seemed like echoes from another lifetime. Alone in his dim apartment, he sat in front of a mirror, a glass of whiskey half finished at his side. The man staring back was not Michael Corleone, not Tony Montana, not the decorated star of Broadway and Hollywood. It was simply Al, a weary soul, wondering if the world had already moved on without him. The ticking of a clock filled the room, louder with each passing second. His eyes, once sharp and fiery, seemed to plead with the reflection, was this the price of being chosen by fame? That night was not about a role or a review. It was about survival. In the stillness, Pacino realized he could either surrender to the shadows or fight his way back into the light. That quiet decision, made in solitude, became the turning point. It was the seed of a rebirth, proof that even legends must first conquer their own darkness before stepping into history once again. Do you remember the first time you saw Michael Corleone's icy gaze or Tony Montana's explosive fury? For millions, those moments are etched forever. They are not just characters, they are fragments of Al Pacino's soul, gifted to the world through the art of performance. In the years following his darkest struggles, Pacino staged a remarkable return. The 1990s brought him back into the spotlight with Heat, Donnie Brasco, and above all, Scent of a Woman, the film that finally earned him his long-awaited Oscar. The world was reminded that his talent had not faded, it had only deepened, carrying the scars and wisdom of survival. Today, his legacy stretches across 5 decades. His films are studied in acting schools, quoted in everyday life, and celebrated in retrospectives. Younger generations who never knew the Bronx boy of the 1940s still discover him and marvel. At over 80, Pacino continues to work, his presence on screen a reminder that artistry has no expiration date. The boy once told he would never make it became the man who defined an era, and his story was still far from over. In the end, Al Pacino's life is not just the story of an actor, it is the story of endurance. From the streets of the Bronx to the grand stages of Broadway, from the haunting power of the Godfather to the fiery chaos of Scarface, his journey reflects the triumphs and wounds of a man who never surrendered to silence. He once said, "Acting isn't a career for me, it's a way of living." And through that truth, he gave generations something far greater than entertainment. He gave them truth itself, raw and unforgettable. For every role, he left a piece of himself. The vulnerability, the rage, the tenderness, and the solitude. That is why his films still breathe today, decades after their release. His legacy is not measured only in awards or box office records, but in the countless hearts moved, the young actors inspired, and the audiences who still whisper his lines as though they were their own memories. So we ask you, is Al Pacino truly the greatest actor Hollywood has ever known? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe for more stories like this, and let us keep these legends alive, together.